Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Forward DFW together with the Dallas Morning News. I'm Ron Corning, and today we are doing a deep dive on cardiovascular health, what it is exactly. It's not just about your heart. It's really important you know that. And we're here with three of the top experts from Baylor Scott and White Health. We're going to talk about prevention. It is never too late to prevent further illness, despite what you may think. We're going to talk about that. Advancements with hypertension. You may more commonly know it as high blood pressure. For those of you who may not really react well or respond well to medication, there is a solution, an advancement in that. And we're also going to talk about a heart valve procedure that now reduces hospital time from days to just hours. Dr. Michael Mack is here from Baylor Scott and White Health to kick off the conversation with that advancement. And I think, Dr. Mack, we're leading with that because in the context of cardiovascular care and advancements, this is a big deal, is it not?
First of all, thanks for having me, Ron. And yes, it is a big deal. It's a once in a generational advancement in the treatment of heart disease.
And what is this valve replacement procedure exactly? Or maybe the better question is, let's start with, to this point, what that kind of surgery looked like for people.
Sure. So, this is one of the most common heart valve problems that people have. It's called aortic stenosis, and it's a blockage of the main valve by which blood leaves the heart, called the aortic valve. This has been able to be treated for the last 50 years with open heart surgery, which means you divide the breastbone, put the patient on a heart-lung machine, stop the heart, open up the heart, cut out the old valve, and sew in a new valve. It traditionally takes about 4 hours altogether and requires being in the hospital 5 to 7 days after surgery and a 6-week recovery. What this new procedure is, and I say new, it was first done in humans in 2002, so it's 22 years old right now, is doing that exact same procedure but without any incisions.
No incisions.
No incisions. So you thread it up from an artery at the top of the leg under X-ray and echo guidance. And it's a valve that's mounted on a balloon, which is on a catheter, which is a long tube that you can help guide it up through the femoral artery and the aorta. And when you're in the proper position, you blow up the balloon and the valve seats in place.
It occurs to me, and you've performed how many of either of these surgeries?
Oh, in the thousands.
In the thousands. So at some point along the way, you knew this advancement was possibly coming, right? Because there are trials and testing and research and so forth. What was it like for you to make that pivot as a surgeon, first of all, from having done so many of those surgeries that involve a really invasive approach to this less invasive approach that also sort of draws on a different skill set, I would think, as a surgeon?
So there's so many times in life that you see something, you say, aha, why didn't I think of that?
This was one of them.
No, this wasn't one of them for me.
It wasn't?
No.
Were you skeptical?
No, but I make no apologies to myself that I didn't invent this because I knew all the reasons why this couldn't work. But once I saw it, and this was in the late 1990s, and it was in a research laboratory, when I saw this being done experimentally for the first time, I said, wow,
really? This
is going to work.
Because what you were doing was working. It had a track record of success. And so you sort of didn't want to rock the boat. Was that sort of the feeling?
No, think of it this way. I've always done bypass surgery, which is bypassing the main heart arteries by the same method, dividing the breastbone, put a patient on a heart-lung machine. And then what Dr. Stoller and Dr. Banerjee do is figured out how to do that without surgery by threading up a catheter into the arteries to supply the heart with blood. And that's called PCI or angioplasty or stents. This is the same thing for the aortic valve. So I had seen this happening already in another form of heart disease. And so this is, think of it the same analogy here, that I never would have figured out how you could take a bigger stent and put a valve inside it and thread it up and get it and stay in position.
So the means by which the valve reached its destination, if you will, was not new to you, but the idea that it could be done in this way was something you sort of stood back and had to really take a closer look at, it sounds like. Now, I know, Dr. Mack, a lot of people are going to be listening to this. They're going to want to Google it and figure out more about it. It's as simple as, and I want to share this with people, TAVR, TAVR. That's all they have to remember is TAVR, correct? What does that stand for officially?
So that's correct. TAVR, T-A-V-R, stands for transcatheter aortic valve replacement.
See how much easier TAVR is?
Absolutely. Now, surgery you can call SAVR, S-A-V-R.
Okay. And either of those things, SAVR or TAVR, will allow people to learn a little bit more. And of course, we're going to give you guidance on how you can learn more about this from Baylor Scott and White Health as well. Let me ask you this, because this is an important part of this conversation. Baylor Scott and White Health is really instrumental in many ways in research, not just providing the best possible care to patients in real time, but also advancing care in ways that will impact patients positively all over the country. What was your part in that when it comes to taking this procedure, refining it, making it better, or understanding it in a better way?
Well, we were the leading institution in the country in proving that this therapy is able to be received by all people over 65 years old, independent of whether they're healthy or extremely frail.
Yeah, in that, there's an important question. Who qualifies for this? You say 65 plus. Mm-hmm. If you're a younger patient and you have some sort of arterial disease, am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Or some sort of cardiovascular disease that's impacting that valve, is this an ideal surgery procedure for someone who's younger?
So think of it this way. This valve was first approved in the United States in 2012, so a little over a decade. And this has gone from a totally open procedure to about 85% of patients over 65 years old are now candidates for this approach. There are still some patients that aren't candidates for a whole host of reasons, but most patients over 65 are. Now, all the research trials have been done in patients 65 and older, and we don't know exactly how long this valve lasts. We know it lasts at least 5 years, and hopefully it lasts as long as surgery, but we don't know that yet. So we have to be very cautious in younger patients. So if you're in your 40s or 50s, you still need conventional open heart surgery, and not this, because we don't think that this valve is going to last 30 years.
But it's possible, is it not, that these procedures and these research projects always start with the sickest among patients?
Correct.
And then you begin to look at how others can benefit from it. Do you see at some point research and progress technologically advancing to a point where younger people will have a longer lasting valve that they can have put in this non-invasive way as well?
So there's a couple answers to that. So the first is, you are correct. The first research trials done in this were in patients that weren't candidates for open heart surgery. And there was no intent for this to be applicable to everyone. And soon we found out that it was as good as surgery. And yes, it is applicable to patients who were good candidates for surgery. Now we have a less invasive way of doing this. Now, there is an option right now in which we can extend the life of a valve. If this valve wears out, we can put a second valve inside the first valve.
Oh, really?
So kind of like the Russian doll phenomenon of one inside one. Now, how many of those we can do is unknown, but it's unlikely to be more than 2. But we can hopefully come close to doubling how long a valve lasts.
The point being, at Baylor Scott and White Health, they're always looking at the options to advance and make things better moving forward for more and more people. Something else you touched on as we went to break, which I think is important as we advance this conversation, is that cardiovascular health can be caused by a range of issues, and people can be affected in a range of ways. What does that look like? How does hypertension play a part in it? And what is an advancement there that could help those who are resistant to medication? We're going to talk about it when we come back here in just a moment. Dr. Michael Mack, thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Get ahead of your heart health. Head to bswhealth.com or use the award-winning digital app to find a physician or schedule an appointment today. You know, we hear a lot about hypertension or high blood pressure and how it may impact your health, your cardiovascular health, whether it be a heart attack or stroke. We've heard those things. What is it exactly? And If you're among those people who don't respond well to medication, what exactly are your options? Dr. Robert Stoller is here from Baylor Scott and White Heart and Vascular Hospital to talk more about this. And I think on this conversation, within this conversation, we can make Dr. Stoller some really good points about cardiovascular disease and how many different roads can lead to it. If I have high blood pressure, do I necessarily have plaque or arterial plaque buildup?
Not necessarily.
But I could still have a heart attack.
You could. That's true.
If I have high blood pressure, am I more guaranteed to have a stroke?
Not necessarily, but your risk is higher of having a stroke over the long period of time.
So if somebody is mindful of their heart health and they get a clean bill of health, but then the blood pressure is an issue, where does that sort of fit in the scheme of things in terms of their level of risk?
The longer you have high blood pressure, the higher your risk of having cardiac disease, stroke, and kidney disease. And so the better we control your blood pressure, the lower that risk will be.
And hypertension or high blood pressure is the leading modifiable cause of heart attack, stroke, and death. And its prevalence most notably worse in underserved U.S. populations. So there are those among us, among certain minority populations, who just have a different predisposition to hypertension. Is that generally what we know from the research?
That's true. Some of it is genetic and some of it is socioeconomic.
Right. And that means access to care, for example, and access to medication.
Exactly.
But also awareness and education is part of it, because there are populations of people who could take steps on their own, who don't necessarily know what those steps are.
That's true. It's helpful if we can get the message out to people to lower the sodium in their diet, to lose weight, to exercise, to not smoke. All of those things are going to help your cardiovascular health, and most of them are going to help your blood pressure as well.
You do have those who do take all of those steps, and they still are just simply plagued with high blood pressure. What does that look like?
Well, it can look like anything from an otherwise perfectly healthy patient coming in who we put on one medication, the blood pressure comes down and they do fantastically well, to another completely healthy patient who comes in that we have on 3, 4, or even 5 blood pressure medications.
Really?
Whose blood pressure we still can't bring under control.
And that brings us to this procedure, which is another advancement in medicine that Baylor Scott and White has been really instrumental in. Describe for me, and I didn't realize this was a revelation, the kidneys contribute to hypertension, or there's a connection to the kidneys. Can you explain that in a way that we can understand?
Right. So there are nerves that run on top of the arteries to the kidneys that release what we call neurotransmitters. But what we're talking about is something called epinephrine or adrenaline. And you know how when you get excited, you might get what you would call the rush of adrenaline, which raises your heart rate and raises your blood pressure. Well, in some patients, those nerves that supply the tops of the kidneys release too much adrenaline or epinephrine, and that keeps the blood pressure over the long term at too high in a steady state.
Really? So now you're able to go in surgically and make an adjustment there. Is that right? Is that what this new procedure is about?
I wouldn't necessarily call it surgically because we don't do any cutting. But what we do is we put a thin tube called a catheter in the femoral artery, which comes right in the groin area. And we can steer that catheter up into the arteries that supply the kidneys.
There's a lot going on with that artery.
We call that
between Dr. Mack and you. I mean, that's like a busy highway, isn't it?
Well, it's the Autobahn to get to the rest of the whole world. Basically.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. It's a real pathway to health. I mean, literally and figuratively.
So the tube we use for this procedure is called renal denervation because we work on the nerves. We denervate the nerves that supply the kidneys. The tube is much smaller. We put a small tube up and we can introduce a catheter, which is a small device, into the arteries that supply the kidneys. And we have 2 different ways we can do these. One involves a balloon. The other involves a spiral catheter. And those catheters release energy. One is radio frequency energy. One is ultrasound energy. And that energy is directed so that it damages the nerves that release too much epinephrine, but it does not damage the arteries or the kidneys themselves. So it is very, very specific.
It's remarkable. I mean, it really is remarkable. I know it's your work and it's your life's work, and you're with it through the whole process. But when we hear that, it just really speaks to advancements in medicine and the sorts of things that come out of this research. Is this a last resort for someone who's completely resistant to medication, or is this something you see as a course of treatment for someone right out of the gate?
That's a great question. The data has proven that this works extremely well and is very safe in patients who are on multiple medications who have no further options.
Mm-hmm.
But as time goes on, which we now have FDA approval to use this device, we will continue to gather more evidence that I believe will prove how effective and safe it is in healthier and healthier patients who take fewer and fewer medications. And I think we're going to advance this to healthier patients going forward.
Let me ask you this. As you treat more patients, are you not also able to gather more and more data over a longer period of time to sort of understand the bigger picture of how this is working?
Absolutely. And we have databases that we use at Baylor Scott and White in conjunction with national databases that gather data from these patients that let us watch trends and which patients will get a better effect, which patients won't get a better effect.
Mm-hmm.
We will learn so much more about this procedure going forward now that it's approved, and we can use it a little bit more liberally.
You find that once you begin engaging with a patient who becomes serious about their hypertension and their health, because by the time they're talking to you, they know they've got a serious problem that needs some serious intervention. Do you find that they become more able or willing to take some of the steps that maybe have failed in the past?
I do. Many are, by the time they get to me for a procedure, they are very, very motivated to improve their outcome and their prognosis over the years. And doing those things we keep talking about with salt and weight and things are going to pay off in spades down the road.
What is it like for you as a doctor who's able to treat patients on a daily basis and see better outcomes so they live better, longer lives, along with the opportunity to gather that data and treat patients in a way that allows you to share information with other institutions around the country to make life better for others? Those are two things that sort of run concurrent in your life.
It's incredibly gratifying. It's great that I'm able to get the newest technology that comes out, to test it in an organized fashion, gather the data, and to give my patients the newest, best therapy that we have coming down the pipeline. For example, TAVR and renal denervation and these things, they make people so much better. They feel better. They live longer. It's incredibly gratifying. It's been my life's work.
And it's amazing that it's accessible to people who live not only in North Texas, but hundreds of miles around in states all around Texas who come here for this kind of care and advancements in medicine. Dr. Robert Stoller, thank you. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what those preventative steps look like every step of the way, not just early in life. Dr. Banerjee joining us right after this. Nearly half of adult Americans are believed to have high blood pressure. Many don't even know they have it. Managing your heart health doesn't have to complicate your daily life. Simple steps like regularly monitoring your blood pressure and talking to your doctor about diet and lifestyle changes can make all the difference. Test your ticker and take the heart risk quiz at heartdiseasequiz.com. All right, we're back with Dr. Subhash Banerjee, and we're talking about prevention. Boy, this is an interesting topic, is it not? Because you are an interventional, is that right? Interventional cardiologist. So is your main goal to sort of catch somebody right at an intersection of a bad decision? Is that sort of how you would characterize what you do?
Well, thanks for, first of all, getting my name right. That was well pronounced.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to be here. But I do want to emphasize that point, that being an interventional cardiologist and doing invasive and minimally invasive heart procedures makes us and people like me most ardent proponents of prevention. Because we know that the durability of this intervention is going to be dependent not just on the technology, but what else happens around the technology, which I'm guessing we are going to talk about.
You hear people say things like, after they've had an episode or a cardiovascular surgery, I have a new lease on life, another chapter. I feel like that's a better way of sort of looking at things than this approach of, well, I'm going to die of something and it's too late now. You only live once. I do feel like there's a little bit of a fatalistic attitude in this country that people feel like if they're too far gone and they didn't take the steps early enough, then what's the point? Are you confronted with that on a regular basis?
Absolutely. I think I couldn't have put it better than what you just said. I think I'm going to use that in my clinic. But I do want to emphasize two areas of prevention: primary prevention and secondary prevention. So prevention is a continuum that can always be adopted, and there needs to be
at any point along the way.
At any point. So the primary prevention is for those individuals who have yet not been diagnosed with a established heart condition, and secondary prevention is to prevent the rapid progression of disease in those who have had it.
Yeah.
So I think both are very important.
We are more reactive, though, than we are proactive. If you say to somebody who's 25 years old, you're predisposed to X, Y, and Z, and it runs in your family, and you'll have a heart attack if you don't do this, I'm not sure every 25-year-old is going to take those preventative steps.
Well, I might disagree.
Okay.
I
want to hear it.
If you can substantiate that with facts and values that quantify that risk. So I am a big fan of the word metricize. I don't know whether it's in the dictionary or not, but what it means is that the current generation, I think, doesn't want to just hear facts and stories. They actually want to have something more measurable. So there are, for example, a biomarker called lipoprotein. It is a form of cholesterol that is completely and exclusively genetically determined. You can't alter it with exercise or diet. So if you measure it in a young person where there's a strong family history and you locate that factor, you can then be very specific about that risk and hopefully alter that behavior.
Doesn't that also speak, though, to the importance of young people recognizing early on the importance of having a primary care physician and annual physicals? I mean, in all honesty, I don't think I was really mindful of it until I was in my mid-30s. I would see a doctor if I were sick. You get your blood pressure checked when you go to the dentist. You generally feel healthy. Should I have gone sooner? And what do you say to young people?
Well, I can tell you what you heard from Dr. Mack and from my colleague, Dr. Stoller. Each one of us would endorse that many of these quintessential pickups are done at the primary care level. So we sometimes take pride in doing that procedure, but the real change that can alter that patient's life course has been made in a primary care doctor's and APP's office. So yes, I think early recognition and screening at that level is absolutely quintessential.
So I want to just hammer home here, Dr. Banerjee, that anyone at any time can begin to take steps to prevent cardiovascular disease. If not prevent it entirely, prevent it from getting worse. Let's run down some of those if we will. Avoid smoking and tobacco use. That seems to be a given, but not always easy.
Well, I think that is something we reinforce at every clinic visit. And I would like to say it is not just smoking, it is the use of tobacco in any form, which I think is often missed.
Yeah. 30 to 60 minutes of daily activity. We're not talking about getting a gym membership and prepping for a marathon. We're talking about just moving, and we are a pretty sedentary culture, are we not?
I underscore that word moving, that a formal exercise routine is always helpful, but for those who are just making a start, just to get moving can be very impactful.
We talk about eating a healthy diet. Sometimes I don't even know if we know what that means, but I think we know we need to stay away from refined carbohydrates, fried foods, heavy fats. If you eliminate those things, just those things from your diet, are you not taking positive steps forward?
You are surely, but I would add that one important way that one can control their diet is to pay attention also to the total amount of calories. I think that's something very important. I think once you get a handle around that, you can then drill down into the quality of food, but the quantity of calories is very essential.
And can we talk about sugar? I mean, I'm more mindful of it now than I've ever been because of an elevated A1C number, which I've reversed. But my point in saying that is I have found there to be sugar in things that I didn't even know had sugar in them and frankly didn't need it. And
good you brought it up. I mean, we can talk about different desserts, but I think the real hidden sugars in our meal is where we need to focus. And I think reading that label and again, quantifying it is going to be the key.
Reduce stress. This is an interesting one because the more unhealthy you are, the more you're stressing yourself out in many ways, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. So that's kind of a vicious cycle, is it not? So where do you start with the stress?
Yeah, I think I'm going to combine stress and sleep under one theme, but I do think that stress has now been formally recognized as a key driver of that predicts adverse outcomes in patients with cardiovascular health, and it is now part of the American Heart Association's vital 8 of life. And I think the Baylor Scott and White website underscores that.
And wouldn't you say if you're not moving and you put on even a little bit of weight, or you've got underlying hypertension, you're not sleeping as well, then you're intaking sugar, you're starting to create really just a cauldron of unhealthy behaviors that feed on each other, do they not?
Exactly. I think stress, eating more, consuming more sugar, and sleeping less. I think those are now recognized formally as important risk factors for heart disease.
I don't think people fully understand or recognize the wide range of cardiovascular diseases or the impact it can have. We only hear about heart attacks. We hear about how to look out for the signs of a heart attack, whatever those might be, pressure in your chest, or feeling nauseous, or your arm feels like it's falling asleep. Those seem to have been really, we've over-indexed on that awareness, and we haven't gotten as much awareness of some of the other cardiovascular diseases we could be impacted by. Can we briefly run down what some of those are?
Yes, I think the plaque buildup with deposition of cholesterol just doesn't happen in the heart arteries or around the valves of the heart. It can happen in the blood vessels that feed your legs, your kidneys, or even your brain. So the term cardiovascular disease includes a spectrum of conditions that include coronary artery disease or blockages in the heart, cerebrovascular disease that affects the brain like stroke, and peripheral arterial disease that affects the blood vessels of the legs. So it could manifest in many different ways.
Yeah, and I think, again, that's where you all have done a great job, and that's what we're trying to do here, of letting people know sort of the breadth and depth and the scope of cardiovascular disease. And it's not just about the heart attack. We talked to Dr. Stoller a little bit about that research and that data and the importance of that. And they said, I think you might have been in the room, that you're really one of the best data specialists they've ever worked with. So that's really a key component of what you're doing at Baylor Scott and White, is it not? That you're gathering that data and you're looking at it not just on its surface, but you're going deep to sort of look for patterns over time?
Absolutely. I call it independent adjudication. That means that data collected post hoc is important, but also verifying the data independently is actually more important. That makes it far more objective and reproducible. So I think those kinds of know-how circle back into our practice, and then probably, we would like to believe, affects our practice and of those who read our publications.
And that's another important point. This data, its findings, the research you do, has been published in journals that are read worldwide. So you are having an impact in this space, not just in Dallas.
Absolutely. And I think that needs to be emphasized. And I'm going to brag about my colleagues, Dr. Mack, Dr. Stoller. Many of our other colleagues, including myself, have published in landmark journals and which are read and published around the world. And I'm actually the editor-in-chief of the American Journal of Cardiology. That was one of the reasons I came to Baylor Scott and White. And that journal is read in 66 countries around the world.
Remarkable.
So yes, hopefully we are making a difference.
Not to put you on the spot, but top of mind, what is one of the most profound revelations that has been born out of the research you've collected and the data you've collected among your patients here in the DFW area?
Well, let me start off with work done by Dr. Mack.
Okay.
He has been one of the leaders around the world in bringing and informing us about the best profiles of patients where transcatheter aortic valve replacement procedures can be done. And it has made headlines at national meetings and also in major journals. Dr. Stoller's name appears regularly and repeatedly on the covers of major journals. And in treating patients with coronary artery disease, he was recently on a publication where drug-coated balloons without stents could be implanted and used for treatment of heart blockages. My work in the area of peripheral arterial disease has been cited, and I've also led two randomized clinical trials and also participate and lead studies that are regulated by the FDA. So we are not only pushing the boundaries in terms of new innovation, we're also closing the loop by capturing that data and advancing the care forward.
And I would think, just one final note, that when you do a more minimally invasive procedure and you're in and out of the hospital and the recovery is shortened, there are hurdles along the way in recovery when you're opening somebody's chest and stopping their heart, and all of that has to heal. And you hear about men experiencing depression and so forth. I would think incidents of that are much lower if it's more minimally invasive. Is that true?
Definitely, I do think that. But I think apart from us, there is a strong team that surrounds us. And I think it is important to emphasize that, especially our cardiac rehab colleagues, our in-house staff members, our nurses, our technicians, and a whole host of specialists that make that holistic care possible for our patients and make the recovery. And we actually do track quality of life and recovery metrics as part of our procedures.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it is whole person care. No one is treated, no illness is treated in a vacuum. And so if you find your way to Baylor Scott and White, there's not a single thing about how you live your life and how healthy or unhealthy you are that will not be uncovered or discovered, correct?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I look forward to hearing from many of your viewers and listeners. And welcome to this discovery of science and cardiovascular medicine.
Yeah, it's all in one place at Baylor Scott and White. Thank you, Dr. Banerjee. Much
Thank you.
appreciated. And Dr. Stoller, Dr. Mack as well. And thank you for watching. I'm Ron Corning. We'll see you next time on Forward DFW. The first step to a healthier heart is knowing your risk. Test your ticker and take the heart risk quiz at heartdiseasequiz.com.